allow others to extend that grace. And the grace begins with yourself. Extend that grace to yourself, and then certainly ask others.
I'm Amy Woodall, and this is The Conscious Habit, a show from the People Forward Network. We're teaching you how to incorporate love and consciousness at work, at home, and the world at large. I'm Amy Woodall, and you're listening to the Conscious Habit Podcast. Today, my dear friend, Deseri Garcia, the founder of Vida, Aventura, joins me as co-host. Together, we host the High Vibe Tribe retreats. We founded these retreats to have magical, transformational experiences for women in the highest vibe places around the world. And this new co-hosted series with Des and me is really intended to share more of our collective consciousness work to help you take a deep dive inside yourself and to elevate your vibe and your experience on this planet. Take a listen. Conscious Habit listeners, Deseri Garcia and I are back to geek out on another topic. And Des, you brought this one up. It's probably been about a month ago when I was sitting in the shit. And, there's still moments I'm crawling in the shit. Yeah, you had this thought. You said, when you're ready, would you be okay talking about it on the podcast? And I was like, okay. And here we are. Do you want to tell listeners what we're talking about today specifically?
Yeah. So we're really finding light in those dark times, and how do we navigate the storms, the inevitable storms and challenges that is life. We get to experience, as one of our upcoming guests says, Dr. Sue Morter, the front side and the back side of the hand, right? Sometimes to know the really, really good times is to have gone through those challenges. And so we're going to talk about things like how have we been able to embrace and navigate uncertainty? We're going to talk about resilience and adversity and turning setbacks into comebacks, but really around what are some of the I'll say best practices that we have. Maybe that's relative to the amount of shit that we've gone through in our lives.
Yeah.
And what are those things that have really been useful for us when we're having to deal with the things that are kind of throw you, I like to say they body slam you to the ground.
What's that like? The universe speaks in a whisper, and then maybe a body slam, at times too. I think you do such a great job, Des, in your coaching practice and even just being a friend and a confidant, to many, of helping people, not, we talked about this in the gratitude episode where we said, don't play whack-a-mole with gratitude. Like sometimes we just have to like sit in it and feel it. But you do such a great job of helping people feel okay with the not okay, but then also when the time is right to recognize where it may be there to serve you. So as a friend, thank you for being that reflection in those moments.
Well, thanks. And I have to watch and make sure that it's like too soon, because the process of going through the stuff is so very important for us. And, having perhaps been through a lot of stuff, I have to watch not wanting to rush to the lesson, not wanting myself or others to rush through the process of wait till you see what's on the other side and to sit in it. If you're willing to let yourself deal with the stuff when it's happening and trust that it's part of the process, you won't have to go back and do it again. So that's always a huge motivator for me. It's like, I better feel all the feels because one, I don't want to be in this, and two, I definitely don't want to do it again.
Well, let's just like share some of those common examples when you're thinking of these opportunities or in moments when we are bringing light, finding the light in dark times. What are some of those human experiences that come to mind for you?
Man, I have a few that were very significant for me, and we might have talked about these in the podcast, but definitely when we've gone through loss, we've lost someone, in your case, Amy, that can be a pet. And also when, some of the most significant times in my life is, walking along someone in the journey, whether it's a friend or family member who's lost someone. I think the dark times can be navigating illness and sickness. And same thing, like maybe it is or isn't something that directly is impacting you. And if it's someone that you deeply care about, like coming alongside them in that journey can be so hard, so heavy and difficult. Wanting to maybe help and make and make a difference and not knowing what the heck to do. And I also feel there are ripples that can happen in our lives, and they're very relative to us. It could be something doesn't go well in a relationship. Maybe a relationship ends. I have a very dear friend I'm no longer friends with, and having to navigate and deal with that. It could be something related to your work that just, kind of topples you over. And I think that we can go through emotional peaks as well as emotional valleys where it's like, wow, I can't really explain what's going on, but I am not feeling my best self. So those are things that come to mind for me and for you. Like, what else for you, Amy?
Yeah, I think, very similar. Like sometimes just feeling lost, like not knowing what's next, whether it is like after a relationship, not knowing, okay, what's next? Will I find someone who loves and cares for me? Will I find the right partner? A job, maybe? You're like, okay, what's next? I thought I, was in this great career, apparently not. And I think in that, the feeling lost can be really challenging, for people. Anytime change happens, there can be a sense of loss that we can experience because we're kind of grieving what we knew to be true and unsure of, what's ahead, unsure of what the light is going to entail. And I think you bring up a good point of whether it's us that's experiencing it or we're walking alongside someone else. I think it's so great for us to dive into, like, what can we do? Whether we're in it, whether we are just being a safe space for somebody who's in it, what steps can we take? What can we do as we're walking the path from darkness to light?
It's it's so interesting because my tendency is, what can I do? And I'm reminded of the Brene Brown. There's a video short that's out there about empathy, and there's a person that falls into this deep hole. Actually, it's an animal. The character in the cartoon is an animal, and this animal walks up, and instead of, looking down and saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" they grab a ladder and climb down into the dark hole with that other character and say, "Whoa, like it's dark down here. It seems lonely and scary. I just wanted to let you know that you're not alone. I'm right here." And I love the simplicity of that. And I love it as a reminder that, one, rushing to, hey, what are you doing in this hole? Like, get out of here. And two, there's nothing you need to do, but just be beside that person and just say, man, I'm going to acknowledge this seems not good. And I'm here.
Do you know what came to mind for me, Des? Do you know where I thought that could potentially go? You're walking down, you see your friends down in a hole, and you just look down and go, thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
I really hate that you're there. And then you keep walking and, it's just like, grab a damn ladder. Come on, because I know there's times where we feel like that's the best that we can do, and not to negate the importance of that, but there are moments when it's like really what somebody desires for someone just to sit in it with them and to just, hold space and,
Exactly.
one step further.
Yeah, exactly. So Amy, what prompted this conversation is just knowing the depth of the grief and the darkness that you recently went through. And I may be putting you a little bit on the spot. as a friend, I hope this supports your process. But I would love,
Thank you.
if you're comfortable doing so, just to share with our listeners, like, it was tough, what you recently have gone through.
It was March was a hard month. And before I share, I have to tell you, I have had to be careful of, this is something else I remember hearing from Brene Brown, which is not to do comparative suffering, which is like, oh, but it could be so much worse. So many other people have it harder, and what I experienced isn't that bad. And, like, it's not healthy to immediately discount those feelings, just because we could point to someone else who may be in a more difficult spot. So we did lose both of our puppies within a week of each other, which was really hard. Our sweet little boy, Parker the Barker, he was 16 years old. He was Mr. Magoo. We loved him so much. He was on his 1000th life, We said goodbye to him on a Monday, and the following Tuesday, our River, our chocolate lab rescue, who really was just the soulmate of our family, we had to say goodbye to her too, which was a bit more unexpected. And I think just that, when you have something or someone that is in your life daily that becomes such an enriched part of what life is like and your routine and, part of your home, and now all of a sudden that's just ceases to exist in your reality, it was hard on the whole family. And the boys said it best. They said, it feels like a house now. This does not feel like a home. They said home is wherever, the four of us are, and this just feels like a house. And so we've been just navigating what life is like without those little love bugs around. And I have been really not good at allowing myself to just sit in the grief over time, because it's like, oh, I got to get busy. I got stuff to do. But sometimes it's so heavy, you just have to sit and honor it. It just is part of honoring the love, is also allowing yourself to feel the pain of the loss. And that's what we've been experiencing for the last month or so.
It takes a lot of courage to do that. It takes a lot of courage when, that wave of grief or loss or the hardness of it comes up. We're designed to avoid that as human beings, and to do the exact opposite and sit in it. It's hard. It's contradictory to what we know for our survival. And, it's so good to remember that when something brings you to your knees, go to your damn knees. It's okay to lose your shit. You're not going to do it in the middle of the grocery store. Well, maybe, or, the middle of a Zoom meeting. And when you can, do it. Grab a blanket, curl up on the couch, bawl your eyes out. Or, I had a client once. She's like, there is no place in my home for me to grieve. I'm like, do you have a closet? Because you can hide from your kids for a few minutes in your closet. So go take 5 minutes. Tears are our body's way of releasing emotion. So if it's tears or if it's cathartic, smashing pillows or whatever it is, do it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You and I'm sure you see this in coaching clients a lot, of people who will say, I'm trying not to cry, or I really don't want to cry. And to be like, please do. Please let that out, because it is your body's way of releasing stress or anger or frustration. We have the capability to cry for a reason. It does not make us weak. We would not have the biological ability to do so if it didn't hold value. The body is perfectly designed. So this is part of it. And I mean, really, the crying and the wailing I had over this sweet animal. And I wanted to be like, Amy, it's a pet. We know that they die. But I'm like, I love her so much. Just to let it happen. And for anybody who's listening, wherever you are, whatever space and place you're holding, if there is sadness or grief or uncertainty, or, if you feel scared, to just let your body feel those emotions. No way out than through, right? You can't get out without going through it.
Exactly. And Amy, you're so good at, highlighting and also thinking about, that's energy. And if we suppress it, where does that go? Right. And so thus the term, our issues are in our tissues. We end up embodying that, right? We absorb it into our body, and then that manifests into, other ailments. And so again, if that's a motivator to just let it out and through and go through it, then let that be the motivator as well.
Amen. You don't want that to creep up in your knees. You're like, lower back. Grief is said to settle on the chest. That grief, if you are someone who has not processed or allowed yourself to grieve, you may find that you have like reoccurring, you get like chronic cough or, reoccurring issues in the chest. It is interesting when you start to study it, all the places that, those emotions can hide.
Well, if you're familiar with Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life, I mean, in the appendix, there is a list of, hey, if you're having this issue physically, through years of talking and working with people, she saw ailments manifest based upon, certain issues that people were having and perhaps not dealing with them. So if you really want to dig into that, there are a lot of resources and there's a science connection to it as well. So it's not just, we like to talk about the woo. It's not just woo. So Amy, thinking about your process with Sweet Parker and River, what are ways that helped you embrace that setback, or how did you find light in that darkness? And how are you finding? Because it's still a process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that I had to force myself to do was to ask for grace from others, to just be okay. There was a podcast episode that I was supposed to record the very next day. And, thank you to Amy Lynn, who rescheduled twice because we had to put Parker down and we were supposed to schedule the next day. And I just said, I am just such a mess there. And it's also for the listeners to know, I'm in a place in life where my boys are also like they're senior and junior. I've been very aware that this chapter of what mom looks like and our day to day and those responsibilities are closing quickly. And so losing our dogs has just created this realization of like, wow, this house is getting lonelier and lonelier. And so I, sitting in those feels, but I had to ask for grace twice from the same person. And she was so loving to give it both times. She was like incredible to say, I'm not going to be able to be my best self for you. And, could we move this? And to ask for grace from clients and to cancel things and to give myself this space instead of I just need to plow through it. That was part of it. I think the other part was talking about it. Like we talked about it as a family. We shared memories. We shared what we were going to miss. We cried together. We, to just not isolate ourselves when we are going through hard times. And often that feels like, I don't know if that's true for everybody. I can definitely isolate when I'm going through a tough time. Like I don't want to answer my text. I don't want to answer calls. I don't want to, but I think connection. So allowing grace, asking for grace and connecting either for the people, that you live with or for your friends, reaching out and just, we need each other to get through it.
I love that. I love the willingness to ask for grace and that invitation to allow your whole family to process together. Yeah, I love that.
Ladies, imagine taking time away to work on you. Meditation, yoga, transformational work, a chance to have grand adventures and build lasting relationships. Deseri Garcia and I founded High Vibe Tribe Retreats to create just that. And if you're curious about joining us on our next retreat, head over to highvibetriberetreat.com, link in the show notes. I mean, you've been through tough times. You've been through loss. You've been through changes. We talked about it when you made the switch from corporate world to Vida Aventura, now 18 years. I love that because I'm like, you have birthed the whole ass kid and it is grown up now. Good for you. It's legal.
It's an adult.
Yeah. You went through those times. And I know you said you used gratitude, to help you through that. What are some of the other pieces when you feel like you're in a dip? What's your go-to?
When I think about like loss and challenges, for me, it's important to remember that when we do lose things, for me, it almost feels like a piece of myself gets kind of chunked out. And so remembering that when you lose, sometimes when it feels like everything, you're still you. And you have the ability to, I'm going to say, quote unquote, call those pieces back to you. Because I distinctly remember having gone through a really, really, really tough year and a half in my life. And I felt like each of the experiences, it wasn't until I wasn't feeling in the process like, oh, each experience is kind of taking a chunk of me away from me. And at some point, I realized I feel like a piece of Swiss cheese. And I've allowed these experiences to, I've associated the losses with losing pieces of me. And I literally called those pieces back. So I think remembering that we're still us, and there's this opportunity to allow those experiences and that space allows something else to grow in us. And it could be empathy, it could be tremendous love and gratitude. It could be clarity, whatever that might be.
I think that's a good reflection, because if you all could Google like comfort zone progression, and the path to growth there is challenge. We are stretched. And sometimes it's in a tough, really like painful way. And sometimes it's maybe lighter discomfort. There could be layers of that. But through the pain, growth does happen, whether it's just perhaps it's a new appreciation. I have definitely been guilty of taking things for granted. We get so used to the life that we have, and like it just feels like, oh, just another day. But those are truly the things that we treasure when that changes, and so I like that what you're sharing there is like on the other side of this, there is going to be something, to your point, empathy, appreciation, more presence. Maybe we'll just relish our relationships a bit deeper. Something good comes from that.
Yeah, I think I am a believer. There's a purpose, a reason for the things that happen, and what can we glean from that? What can we learn? Perhaps rather than going to a place of, in my case, hollowness or bitterness or fill in the blank. How could this have possibly served me in some way? And maybe it is this wildly new perspective that allows you to not take life or relationships or our sweet little puppies for granted.
Yeah, I miss the dog hair. I never thought I would say that.
I know, it's the wildest stuff. Man, I miss picking up the poop in the yard.
Yeah.
Too much?
Yeah. Maybe not that far, but
Yeah.
plenty of other things that we're missing along the way. I think, if we're kind of looking at the ingredients, then if we put together what we've experienced, what do you feel like in the toolkit for I'm sitting in the shit at the moment, whether it is uncertainty, I hate my job, I don't know what I want to do with my life, I just left a long-term relationship, I don't know what's next for me, I'm experiencing a loss. Is there sort of the tools in the toolkit? We've mentioned some, but what come to mind for you that you would recommend?
I think probably the biggest one is perspective. That again, remembering you're still you when you lose things. And that, and I know this may sound cliche, trust the process. The grief, the storm, the challenge won't last forever. Oftentimes I might have something disruptive happen in a day. And after I've had the time to sleep on it, or maybe I've had taken a walk or taken a few minutes to meditate, it changes. And so allowing that space and time to shift the perspective.
What I just wrote down was work on managing the moment. And it reminds me of like Eckhart Tolle's work, in Power of Now and A New Earth. And not a direct quote, but he talks about how suffering exists when we resist what is, when we resist what's in the present moment. And I think when we are in moments of uncertainty or darkness or sadness, we often are going to what was or what no longer will or could be. And to just regulate ourselves in the moment of like, in this moment, I'm okay. Even like I'm sad or I'm, scared or what have you. But I like that piggyback on your perspective, go for a walk, get outside, put your feet in the grass, kind of pull the lens back to just try and keep yourself anchored here. It's easier to say than to do, but we can do anchoring exercises just by going to our breath and breathing in, and you could do breathe in for a count of 5 and out for a count of 5. It could be that we anchor our awareness in something that we see. Maybe we're looking at a tree. Maybe we're, just anchor our awareness in what is real in front of us so that we can help regulate our nervous system, as well, and manage the moment. We can't manage the future. We can't change the past. It only unfolds in the here and now.
I love that. And that makes me think of, Amy, something that comes up often when I'm talking to coaching clients is just remembering, especially folks that are very, sometimes being tactical can be very useful. And so I think about control the controllables. Control those. What are the things? And I literally will say, let's talk about all the things that are within your control. Now let's talk about all the things that are not within your control. And next, let's talk about all the things that you can influence. And I'm reminding everyone of that because I think by default, we tend to focus on the uncontrollables. And that can feel like that very, very, very deep and dark hole. And so we can switch our brains on by looking at and focusing on those things that we can control and what we might be able to influence.
Amen. What a good perspective, man. It's so easy for us to be, just try to have our hands in the things that we, no matter how much we try, like there's no shifting that's going to happen there. So good reminder, control what you can control, own your shit. The next piece I would add on is just who's your crew? I think we've been so gifted in we have a mastermind that we're a part of that has been so great that we have this safe space to share the hard things. And we're usually not alone in the experience. Somebody else has experienced it somehow, some way, and has maybe already been through, so they can provide some perspective, resources, hope. We have Quaid, which is an executive peer group that we're a part of, where we can bring all the things, business stuff and personal stuff, and it's a safe space to share hard things. And then High Vibe Tribe has been that as well. The work that we do on our retreats, provides this safe space for people to heal parts of themselves that maybe they didn't even know still needed some healing. And so I think that community, like, who are your people? Where are your safe places to share those hard things? And they want to be there to help you. Think of how much you're fulfilled by helping other people. Other people want that too. We need to be as good of receivers as we are givers. And Des, you, again, like that's another lesson I've learned from you, is to be a good receiver in those moments.
Yeah, well, I had a big smack on the head around, I did a personal development workshop, and we had a exercise that was about givers and takers. And it really resonated for me, like how if you are the type of person who gives, eventually you're a taker because you're taking away others' opportunity to give to you as well. And I mean, I get chills thinking about that because I don't want to snatch somebody's good deed by being an overgiver. And I'm not saying I'm an overgiver. I might have before that been a taker, but balancing that out, right? And allowing that space for others to be there for you and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Accept the love, accept the call, accept the, maybe they want to make you dinner, take you to dinner, buy you dinner, or, to just, be in receivership.
Just say thank you.
Yes. But we're also so good at like the thank you and then the rejection, you didn't have to. You're like, thank you and shut it. Nothing else.
Yeah. Zip it.
Any other advice, any other pieces of that toolkit that you would recommend for listeners to be on the lookout for, to add to the arsenal if they're sitting in a difficult space or time?
I would, we're big believers, Amy, of mindfulness and self-care. So, oftentimes we have this, you and I have this conversation. I think I mentioned it to you last week. I'm like, I'm feeling a little disruptive and disrupted. And I said, I think I need to double down on my practice, my meditation, taking some deliberate time. So allowing yourself to just take care of you, whatever that looks like. We happen to love meditation. We happen to love mindfulness. Maybe let yourself go to a yoga class or read a book, or, it's nice weather now. Go walk in your grass. It doesn't have to cost anything. Go outside, let the sun hit your face, but do it with intention and deliberateness.
The piece that always comes to mind for me, it's a Marianne Williamson quote, which may actually be a direct quote from the Course in Miracles. I'm not sure, but it is, only that which I'm not giving can be missing from any situation. And so I'll say that again, only that which I'm not giving can be missing from any situation, which sometimes there's this reflective of what is missing right now. And what am I missing? I'm missing connection. I'm missing love. I'm missing certainty. What am I missing? And then finding out, how can I get that? Or how can I give myself that? I think that's a lot of times just, can I bring a place of love in the midst of pain? That was a practice I really have tried to be conscious about, is I'm just going to allow myself to feel this, but kind of centered in love and compassion, as if I were parenting that, little girl who is sad inside, and, giving that space. I love the Andrea Butcher and I talked about this on an episode. We talked about the poem, The Guest House by Rumi. And it talks about just like this being human thing essentially means we're going to feel it all. And it can all be beautiful, even in the midst of pain. I'm summarizing. It's not the words it uses, but it said, invite everything in because it all has value. And, I think in that, as we're sharing what's worked for us, or, maybe what Des has coached clients through in the past is, give yourself time, find your space, find your people, but, love yourself along this path too. This is part of being human.
I love how you summed up grace in that way. Allow others to extend that grace, and the grace begins with yourself. Extend that grace to yourself, and then certainly ask others, for grace.
Well, as we kind of begin to wrap this episode up, are there tools you mentioned You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay? Are there some other books or resources that you have found particularly helpful that you might recommend to listeners?
I love, of course, Louise Hay. You mentioned Marianne Williamson. What's her book on love?
A Return to Love.
A Return to Love. Oh my God. Like if you're looking to really heal your heart, that's a fantastic book for that.
Very good. I've read it multiple times upon your recommendation. It's so good.
It's a guide, truly, to help us with all parts of our lives.
Yeah, I would throw in Eckhart Tolle, and I think in A New Earth, specifically if we're dealing with illness, I think he does a really great job of talking about experiencing the pain body and what we can do to find some peace in the midst of suffering. I feel like that could be a really, great resource along the way as well. Okay, Des, before we wrap up this episode, let's share our 3 takeaways with listeners. What's number 1 for you?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the perspective, right? If we can kind of keep our minds open, that can like turn the key for us. So remembering that what you're going through won't last forever, and that when we do lose things, we haven't lost ourselves, and to just allow that process to unfold.
So good. I think number 2 for me is staying in receivership, staying open to receiving. When we are in a tough time, it's likely you have done so much good to give to other people, and to allow yourself to just receive love, compassion, grace, like allow yourself to receive. And in Des's words, all that needs to be said is thank you.
I love that. And the third one that I'll mention, especially for if you want the tactical approach, control the controllables. Focus on the things that you can control and or influence, not the things that are are outside of your control. Even if you have to write it down, go ahead and write it down. It'll make sense to your cognitive brain.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Habit Podcast. If you dug this episode, we'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you're into this consciousness thing, if you like this conversation and you want to meet more like-minded people, head on over to Facebook and join the Conscious Habit community. Until next time, do the world a favor and go love yourself.